Do you ever speak to yourself in a way that you would never dream of speaking to somebody you care about? You make one mistake and your mind says, you always get things wrong. You feel nervous about doing something and it tells you, you're not really capable of this. Or you look at somebody else's life and quietly decide, they're doing so much better than me. And that voice can become so familiar that you stop recognising it as a voice. You simply start believing that it's the truth. But here's the thing, your inner critic isn't always telling you the truth. And in this video I'm going to show you a simple 4-step tool that can help you turn down its volume, challenge what it's saying to you, and develop a kinder, stronger voice of your own. Hi, I'm Dave and welcome to Dave's Minecraft, and this channel is for caring, thoughtful people who sometimes feel overwhelmed, overthink themselves into a corner, or struggle to recognise their own worth. And here we explore practical ways to calm your mind, build self-belief and resilience, and develop a kinder, healthier relationship with yourself. And today we're looking at that less than helpful commentator who appears to have taken up permanent residence inside your head. Your inner critic. Who doesn't pay rent, who rarely says thank you, and yet it still seems to think it should have an opinion about pretty much everything you do. And your inner critic is the part of your self-talk that judges, questions, criticises and predicts the worst. It might tell you you're not good enough. You're going to embarrass yourself. People will think you're stupid. You should have done better. You're too old. You're too inexperienced. You've left it too late. Or the old favourite, who do you think you are? And sometimes the inner critic sounds harsh and obvious, but it can also sound strangely reasonable. It might say, I'm only being realistic. There's no point getting your hopes up. Other people are naturally more confident than you. And perhaps you should wait until you feel completely ready. And that final one can keep you waiting for an extremely long time, possibly until around 3 weeks after never. Your inner critic isn't necessarily there because there's something wrong with you. In many cases it evolved as an attempt to protect you. It may have learned that if it criticised you first, you might avoid being criticised by somebody else. If it warned you not to try, you might avoid disappointment. If it encouraged you to stay quiet, you might avoid rejection. And if it demanded perfection, you might feel safer from judgment. So although the inner critic can sound cruel, its original intention may have been protection. The problem is that that protection strategy is often outdated. It's using an old map to guide your present life, and it may still be responding to experiences from school, childhood, previous relationships, workplaces, or difficult periods in your life. But you aren't standing in exactly the same place anymore. You've learned, you've grown, you've survived things you once believed you couldn't handle. So the inner critic may still be speaking from an earlier chapter in your life, but it doesn't have to write the chapter you're living now. One of the most important things you can learn about your mind is this: a thought is not automatically a fact. Your mind can produce a thought without the thought being accurate, useful or deserving of your obedience. You might think, I'm going to fail, but that's a prediction, not a fact. You might think, everybody's judging me, but that's an assumption, not actual evidence. You might think, I'm useless, but that's a hugely sweeping judgment about your entire identity based on one difficult moment. And the inner critic often speaks in extremes. Always, never, everybody, complete failure, total disaster. And it takes one mistake and turns it into a character reference. You forget somebody's name and suddenly your inner critic is behaving as though you have brought shame upon the entire family. But making a mistake doesn't mean you failed in life. Struggling with something doesn't mean you're incapable, and feeling uncertain doesn't mean you should stop. Here's the headline: it means you're human. And when people hear the phrase, silence your inner critic, they may imagine that the goal is to eliminate every negative thought forever. And that probably isn't realistic. Trying to forcibly remove a thought can sometimes make it louder. It's a little like telling yourself, whatever happens, don't think about a bright pink elephant. And now several of you have a bright pink elephant wandering through your living room. And the aim isn't necessarily to stop the critical voice from ever appearing. The aim is to stop automatically giving it the final word. You may not control every thought that arrives in your head with a camp bed, but you can learn to decide which thoughts are allowed to influence your next steps. And I'd like to give you a simple tool that you can use whenever your inner critic starts pumping up the volume, and it's called the C.A.L.M, Critic Method. And C.A.L.M stands for catch your voice, ask whether it's true, language shift, move forward kindly. And with that in mind, let's look at each step. So first, C is catch your voice, and that is notice that your inner critic is speaking. And that may sound simple, but the voice can be so familiar that we don't even question it anymore. We hear I can't do this, and we immediately step back. We hear I'll make a fool of myself, and we remain silent. We hear I'm not good enough, and we reject ourselves before anybody else has the opportunity to accept us. So begin by catching the thought. You might quietly say, that's my inner critic speaking, or I'm having a critical thought. Notice the difference between saying I'm a failure and saying I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. And the first statement treats the thought as your identity, and the second creates a little space between you and the thought. You are the person noticing the voice. You're not the voice itself. Second, A. A is for ask whether it's true. And once you've caught the thought, ask some gentle but direct questions. Is this thought completely true? What evidence supports it? What evidence doesn't support it? Am I confusing a feeling with a fact? Am I judging my whole life based on one moment? Would I say this to somebody I care about? For example, your inner critic might say, you always mess everything up. Is that completely true? Everything? Every single thing you've ever attempted? Probably not. You may have made a mistake. You may have struggled. Something may not have worked as you'd hoped. But that's very different from, I always mess everything up. The inner critic dislikes careful questioning because it prefers dramatic headlines. It doesn't want a fair investigation. It wants to arrive wearing a judge's wig. Bang a small hammer and declare you guilty before lunch. So slow the process down. Ask for evidence. Thirdly, L is for language shift. And this third step is to change the language. Not into false positivity, not I'm the greatest human being who ever walked the earth and everything I touch turns to gold. Your mind probably wouldn't believe that. Instead, choose language that is balanced, believable and constructive. Change I can't do this to I don't know how to do this yet. Change I'm going to fail to this may be difficult but I can prepare and give it a genuine attempt. Change I made a complete fool of myself to I felt uncomfortable but one awkward moment doesn't define me. And change I should be further ahead by now to I would like to make more progress and I can choose my next step today. And change I'm not good enough to I'm learning to recognise my value without requiring perfection. And here's the fundamental truth, and please, please, please remember this and imprint it on your mind for all eternity. The language we repeatedly use shapes the way we experience ourselves. Harsh language closes us down. Balanced and measured language gives us room to respond. You don't have to replace criticism with fantasy. Replace it with truth, perspective and encouragement. And fourthly, M, move forward kindly. And this final step is to take one small action without waiting for the inner critic to give you permission. The inner critic may still say you're not ready, and you can answer, perhaps I don't feel fully ready, but I can take one small step. Send the email, make the phone call, write the paragraph, ask the question, go for the walk, attend the meeting, record the video, apply for the opportunity, set the boundary. You don't have to feel completely confident before you act. Sometimes confidence arrives after you've acted. And the goal isn't to bully yourself into action, it's to encourage you to move forward as you would encourage somebody you genuinely care about, firmly, patiently, kindly. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're about to try something new. Perhaps you want to speak in a meeting, apply for a different job, or begin a project that matters to you, and your inner critic says you're not qualified enough. People will see that you don't know what you're doing. First, catch the voice. That's my inner critic trying to protect me from embarrassment. Then ask whether it's true. Is it true I know nothing? What experience do I have? What have I successfully handled before? And does being nervous mean I'm incapable? Then shift for language. I may not know everything, but I have useful experience. I can prepare, and I'm allowed to keep learning. And finally, move forward kindly. I'll spend 20 minutes preparing and then I'll take the next step. The inner critic may not disappear, but it no longer is driving your car. It can sit in the back and offer unwanted directions if it insists, but you're holding the steering wheel. And some people feel uncomfortable speaking kindly to themselves. Some fear it will make them lazy, complacent, or unwilling to take responsibility. But self-compassion is not the same as making excuses. Self-compassion doesn't say it doesn't matter what I do. It says what happened matters and I can respond without destroying myself. It doesn't say I never need to improve. It says I can improve more effectively without using shame as my main source of motivation. And you can take responsibility without attacking your identity. You can acknowledge I handled that badly without adding therefore I'm a terrible person. You can say I need to prepare better next time without saying I'm completely useless. Healthy self-talk allows honesty and kindness to sit at the same table. And when the inner critic becomes loud, ask yourself, what would I say to somebody I loved if they were experiencing this? You probably wouldn't say, yeah, you're right, you're hopeless, and this one mistake has ruined everything. You might say, you had a difficult moment, you were doing your best with what you understood at the time. You can learn from this. This doesn't define you. Take a breath and let's work out the next step. The kindness you so freely offer others, people, is, believe it or not, also available to you. You don't have to earn it through exhaustion, achievement, or perfection. How about this? For the next 7 days, try keeping a short inner critic record. And whenever you notice a harsh thought, write down 4 things. What did my inner critic say? What triggered it? What would be a more balanced response? And what small action will I take next? So, for example, my inner critic said, you're going to make a mess of this. The trigger was, I was asked to do something unfamiliar. A balanced response is, I've handled unfamiliar situations before. I can ask questions and prepare. My next action is, I will write down the first 3 things I need to do. You don't need to write pages. A few lines are enough, and the purpose is to interrupt the pattern before criticism becomes conclusion and conclusion becomes avoidance. And please remember this, your inner critic is not your truest voice. Your inner critic may be loud, but loud doesn't mean wise. It may be familiar, but familiar doesn't mean accurate. And it may have been with you for years, but length of service doesn't automatically qualify it for senior management. There's another voice within you, a steadier voice. A voice that can recognise difficulty without giving up. A voice that can admit mistakes without turning them into an identity. And a voice that can say, this is hard, but I can take the next step. I feel uncertain, but I'm still capable of learning. I didn't handle that perfectly, but I can repair, reflect, and grow. I don't need to be fearless to move forward. And the more often you practice that voice, the stronger and more natural it becomes. It's like building a muscle. It takes repetition. You may not silence your inner critic by fighting with it, but you can silence its authority by no longer treating every word it says as the truth. And remember the C.A.L.M method. Catch your voice. Ask whether it's true. Language shift. Move forward kindly. You're not required to believe every thought you have, and you're not required to criticise yourself into becoming better, and you're not required to wait until you feel completely confident before living your life. Your inner critic may have a voice, but so do you. And with awareness and practice and a little patience, you can make your voice the one that guides you forward. And if this video has helped you, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and perhaps share it with somebody whose inner critic has been giving them a particularly difficult time recently. And you never know who may need reminding that they are more than the harsh voice inside their head. Thank you for being here, and as always, take good and kind care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.